Adam Dunnett is the Secretary General of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. He spoke to Paul Barber about the EU's key demands in talks with Beijing.
Well, I think for those back in Europe, a big issue is the trade deficit. The ambassador here called it the world's largest historical trade deficit ever. It's amounting to nearly 400 billion euros last year. It's on the Chinese side. This is show that China is exporting twice as much to the EU as the EU is sending towards China, and on the European statistics side, it's nearly 3 times that amount. It's the exports from China to the EU have just grown colossally in the last 2 years, approximately 20% and 30% growth in 2001 and 2002, whereas last year EU exports to China only grew by 3%. So obviously that's a very, very obvious eyesore. The EU's got one of the lowest trade tariff markets in the world, approximately 3% and a bit on average, whereas China's still at five and a bit percent. So there's obviously things that can be done on the Chinese side to lower tariffs, to bring in more European goods and services here. But it's not just the tariffs; it's actual access to the market itself, and being able to bring goods in and being able to invest here in the same way that Chinese companies are able to invest in Europe. I think a big cause of concern is in the past we knew that the Chinese market was developing and it wasn't quite as open as Europe, but it would get there eventually. I think from the view from a lot of Europeans is China's there now. China's the world's largest exporter. It's got a GDP per capita that's higher than a number of European member states. And Chinese companies now are investing more in Europe than we're investing in China. So I think the feeling is really now is the time for the level playing field to appear like we've been asking for a long time now already.
Mm-hmm. And both sides are saying that they will work together to stabilise supply chains and to oppose decoupling. Do you think that both sides are really united on that, and it's something that they can find common ground on, and what kind of practical steps can they take to avoid those things?
Yeah, I think they would be wise to do so. I mean, I think everyone can understand with COVID and with the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the concern on the European side about supply chain resilience. But as we've seen in a number of reports and coming out of the Commission itself as well, the restrictions that we're looking at to ensure the supply chain within European for critical areas is really, really limited to a select number of products. So I think it's dangerous for us to make this a full-blown case of being much more detrimental to trade than it actually is. I think this is a part of just a jigging of what already was some very, very strong global supply chain networks.
And if we could talk about the issue over electric vehicles, Chinese electric vehicle exports into Europe and this probe into that, and whether there is unfair advantage for Chinese companies from subsidies. The Chinese say this is not the case, and they are expressing their concern over this probe. I mean, is this quite an unhelpful time for this to be looming on the horizon?
I mean, Chinese exports, e-vehicle exports are making a very strong impact around the world globally. We have a WTO trading system that China is a proud member of, and so that system allows for the use of subsidies in certain instances, and it also has some very clear rules on where it's seen as an abusive market or having a damaging impact on markets. So this is only an investigation at this point, and I think we should let it run its course like the processes are intended to do, and we shouldn't jump to any conclusions quite so quickly. The issue of subsidies is a matter of concern for chamber members here. China does use subsidies in a number of areas, and it's used them to great effect. We've seen that happen before. But for us, the most important thing is if and when these subsidies are being used, is that they're being used on a basis where people have equal access to them, and it's done so in a transparent manner, and again, in a way that doesn't disrupt markets in a detrimental way.